Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we're diving back into the works of Mr. Aleister Crowley. This is Liber 4. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Liber 4 with Part 2, Chapter 16, The Magic Fire, with considerations of the Thurable, the charcoal, and the incense. This may be a short one today. Y'all may wind up with two depending on how short it is, but it's only like 3 pages long. I might be able to get done with it in less than half an hour. Into the magic fire all things are cast. It symbolizes the final burning up of all things in Shiva Darshana, the absolute destruction alike of the magician and the universe. There is an assumption that the universe will be destroyed, and there is no reason to really believe that. I know that is an unconventional belief, but this is a created place, and it is somewhat logical to deduce that someday the creation will be destroyed, but there is no real reason to believe that. There is no real reason to believe that entropy is going to overset, because the very first law, nothing can be created or destroyed, only transferred in form. When something loses heat, something else is gaining heat. Entropy does happen, but it is a cycle of this turning into that. And there may be a point where matter collapses, but it is resprung. It is not a black hole that simply absorbs things. That is not logical at all. There may be some black hole-like thing that absorbs and spits it out on the other side in some other way, but there is not just the loss of things. And so this is something that we say because we die, not because it is intrinsic to the universe that there will be a destruction. It is an assumption that we make that is much like the illusion, right? This world is an illusion. It's not real. You don't have to worry about it. Wrong, right? There is no reason to believe that the universe will be destroyed. It might be that it's good to speculate about, but there is no way to prove either way. Casting into the fire, to me, right, the fire is a symbology of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, which is literally everything, and the fire is the visible exothermic reaction. We get to see the change taking place from one gas into another, right? That's what fire is. Lightning is the transfer of electricity. We get to see that. Both of those are representations of fire. Fire is literally the change, and so yes, everything is cast into the fire, right? Everything is subject to change. Everything does have entropy, but once again, right, this is the symbology for the Spirit to me. Anytime you see the fire, that represents Spirit. Every time it's change, it's motion, it's movement. The Thurable stands upon a small altar. A Thurable is that little small censer that the Catholics use on the string, and they walk around and they, it's got the little holes in it, and they stick the incense in it and light it on fire, and then they walk around making smoke on everyone. My altar is of open brasswork, bound thereon in silver or gold. Footnote, quotation corrected. This altar stands in the east as if to symbolize the identity of hope and annihilation. Okay, so your hope rests in annihilation? These are not the same things, right? Hope and annihilation are definitely not the same goal. Unless you have that victim mentality mindset that this is an illusion and annihilation is actually the victory, which is kind of stupid, but do you, boo? This brass contains the metals of Jupiter and Venus fused in a homogeneous alloy. This is then symbolical of divine love, and it is open brasswork because this love is not limited in direction or extent. It is not particularized. It is universal. Upon this altar stands the censer proper. It has 3 legs symbolical of fire. Footnote, because Shin, the Hebrew letter of fire, has 3 tongues of flame and its value is 300. If you are interested in learning about the Hebrew alphabet and some of the meanings behind it, we are doing on Pitcast Saturdays noon Central Time an exploration of the Hebrew alphabet with Jason from Green Country Agroforestry, and he is walking us through the alphabet and some of the meanings behind the words and some of the spiritual significance that we can take from that. We have not yet got to Shin, but I do believe it is coming up fairly soon, so if you are interested in a better interpretation of some of these things, that would be a good place to check it out. It's noon Saturday Central Time. Its cup is a hemisphere, and supported from its edge is a plate pierced with holes. This censer is of silver or gold because they were called the perfect metals. It is upon perfection that imperfect is burned. Upon this plate burns a great fire of charcoal, impregnated with niter. This charcoal is, as chemists now begin to surmise, the ultimate protean element. Absolutely black because it absorbs all light, infusible by the application of any known heat, the lightest of those elements which occur in the solid state of nature, the essential constituent of all known forms of life. Okay, so charcoal, if you were unaware, like there is a process of making charcoal. It's not something that occurs naturally, right? You cut down a tree and you break it into pieces, and then you take that and you bury it, right? And then you light a fire on one end, and that fire slowly works its way through the tree from one end to the other with an oxygen-deprived atmosphere. The carbon and the various elements within the wood contain enough oxygen to allow it to smolder, and it burns out most of the organics that are not directly carbon. Carbon is left over. Now, infusing that with niter, like I'm not positive, but I believe that this is like let's just look it up instead of potassium nitrate. Okay, so that is definitely going to be fire, right? And so infusing charcoal with potassium nitrate is going to produce a hell of a fire, right? Now, whether that is still considered charcoal or not is going to be the area of contention here, right? Charcoal is the pure form of the other things. When you start adding in, they get them called other things, but just get into the chemistry of it a little bit. Absorbs all light. That's going to be a little bit difficult for me. I doubt very seriously that it absorbs all light. I doubt that it's absolutely black. Infusible by the application of any known heat. You would be extremely surprised how easy it is to start some chemical fires, and potassium nitrate is definitely going to be fairly easily to start. And I'm pretty sure that is like they use that in combination with sulfur to start matches. The lightest of those elements which occur in the solid state of nature, the essential constituent of all forms of life. I don't know that carbon is. Like there are others that might be, I don't know, I'm not that big of a chemist. It has been treated with niter, whose potassium has the violet flame of Jupiter, the father of all, whose nitrogen is that inert element which by proper combination becomes a constituent of all the most explosive bodies known, and oxygen, the food of fire. Footnote, that is to say, this niter is potassium nitrate or saltpeter. Such charcoal impregnated with potash is now commonly sold for incense, burning in the form of disc with an indentation on the top. Three Kings charcoal is a popular brand, but some self-starting barbecue briquettes are also of this composition and much less expensive. This fire is blown up by the magician. This blaze of destruction has been kindled by his word and by his will. Into this fire he cast the incense. Wait, hold on now. You just told us that this is incense. Right? The fire is, okay, whatever. Symbolical of prayer, the gross vehicle or image of his aspiration. Owing to the imperfection of this image, we obtain mere smoke instead of perfect combustion. But we cannot use explosives instead of incense because it would not be true. Our prayer is the expression of the lower aspiring to the higher. It is without the clear vision of the higher. It does not understand what the higher wants. And however sweet may be its smell, it is always cloudy. In this smoke, illusions arise. We sought the light, and behold, the temple is darkened. In the darkness, the smoke seems to take strange shapes, and we may hear the crying of beasts. The thicker the smoke, the darker grows the universe. We gasp and tremble, beholding what foul and unsubstantial things we have evoked. Yet we cannot do without incense. Unless our aspiration took form, it could not influence form. This also is the mystery of incarnation. This incense is based upon gum olibanum, the sacrifice of the human will of the heart. This olibanum has been mixed with half its weight of storax, the earthly desire, sweet, dark, sweet, and clinging, and this again with half its weight of lignum aloes, which symbolizes Sagittarius, the arrow. Why? What is the point of that? Footnote. Note that there are two arrows, the divine shot downward, the human upward. The former is the oil, the latter the incense, or rather the finer part of it, and so represents the aspiration itself. The arrow, and so represents the aspiration itself. It is the arrow that cleaves the rainbow. What? This arrow is temperance in the tarot. Really? And it is a life equally balanced and direct, which makes our work possible. Yet this life itself must be sacrificed. Now, I don't know that the arrow is temperance in the tarot. There is no reason whatsoever to associate them two things together, right? I've been reading the tarot. If you were unaware, there is a playlist. I did that. Now, temperance does represent a life equally balanced. It does. And that is what makes the work possible. That's true. Life must be sacrificed, like in dedication to, is not really a sacrifice if you are doing it right. But the arrow is temperance. I have no frame of reference for that being. I guess maybe there is some astrological significance attached to temperance in that way, but honestly, I haven't found a whole lot of value in reading the tarot with the astrological signs. I just haven't. And so that it doesn't make any sense to me why this would be the arrow, right? Because honestly, if we're talking about it, Sagittarius as a constellation really doesn't make sense for that if you look at the actual stars, right? If you look at the picture drawn over the stars, it really doesn't line up in the way that it should for that to be the representation that they are trying for. So, anyway, back to the text. In the burning up of these things arise in our imagination those terrifying or alluring phantasms which throng the astral plane. This smoke represents the astral plane which lies between the material and the spiritual. One may now devote a little attention to the consideration of this plane, about which a great deal of nonsense has been written. There has been a great deal of nonsense written about the astral plane, that is true. We have not reviewed much of it over here. When a man shuts his eyes and begins to look about him, at first there is nothing but darkness. If he continues trying to penetrate the gloom, a new pair of eyes gradually opens. Some people think that these are the eyes of imagination. Those with more experience understand that this truly represents things seen, although those things themselves are totally false. Just when you think he might start making some sense. Right. The eyes of imagination. This is a major significant problem with astral projection, with many of the meditative practices and the things that people see, right? I don't have this particular problem. We have discussed it before, but it's aphantasia, right? I don't have the ability to close my eyes and willfully envision anything. If I tell you to close your eyes and picture a box, you can probably do so. If I tell you to picture grass, you can probably do so. I cannot. Anything that comes to me is completely outside of my will, so anything that I see in a meditative state I can put a little bit more faith in. And I don't even put a whole lot of faith in that, right? I do believe it because I can't make it happen, but it is still a test this situation, never a just take it on faith type of thing for me. It's just not. But many people, 98+% of the population, has the ability to imagine at least a little bit. And that is a major problem with the astral projection. That is why there was so much wild things that was written about it, like he just said, right? The eyes of imagination are real. Many people go and they do these things and they see exactly what they are looking for. They are going with an expectation that they will have a certain experience, and that's exactly what they have. As a matter of fact, Mr. Crowley has been quite insistent upon you should already know what you're going to get from your meditation before you go into your meditation, which I absolutely disagree with wholeheartedly. You should go into this with no expectation to see any particular thing whatsoever, so that if you do see something, you can put a little bit more faith into it. But there is, for 98% of the population, this problem. The eyes of imagination are real, right? Even Edgar Cayce, who had verifiable things, right? He was able to astrally project and verifiably see things. He also had problems, right? There was many times that he did it and it was not correct. Those don't get as much publicity, but it is a thing that happened. And there are many of his views that we are still yet to have any revelation upon. The tablets of Teote buried underneath the Sphinx in a secret chamber. There might be a chamber. There is reason to believe that, but there is no reason to believe that these tablets are in there. They might be. I would be so very thrilled if they actually were, but that doesn't mean that they are. Anything that is taken through a spiritual viewing should be taken with a grain of salt. At a minimum, right? You should be putting it to the test. You should be verifying, trust, but verify pretty much everything. Especially when you are dealing with astral projection or visions. There are many problems with prophecy. That is merely one of them. So it is entirely possible, I do not deny that at all, that you can truly represent things seen. But there is an equal and even greater possibility that it is exactly what you want to see. You should always bear that in mind anytime that you are doing anything involving this, because much like me, you can be wrong too. I mean, everybody can be wrong about anything that they think they know. You would be really surprised some of the things that you could be turned over about. Back to the text. As first the seer will perceive great gloom, in subsequent experiments perhaps figures may appear with whom the seer may converse, and under whose guidance he may travel about. This plane being quite as large and varied as the material universe, one cannot describe it effectively. We must refer the reader to Liber 0 and to Equinox 2. I will not refer you over there, right? You're free to go and look for it yourself, but the plane is large and varied, right? Nobody is going to be able to give a full definitive explanation of it because it is going to be entirely subjective in large part. Right? And entirely in large part, I understand that's not correct, right? In large part, it is going to be subjective. Not entirely. Entirely is a big word. I don't want to use that, but there, like I said, there are some verifiable things that have been done. Some people actually do see things, but most people are just projecting and not their spirit. This astral plane has been described by Homer in the Odyssey. Really? I don't remember that. I read through the Odyssey. We have done the Odyssey, right? No, we did the Iliad. We didn't do the Odyssey. Okay. Yeah, I got that backwards. Okay. I was like, really? I don't remember that, but it's because it's the wrong book. Here are Polyphemus and the Laestrygons. Here Calypso and the Sirens. Here, too, are those things which many have imagined to be the spirits of the dead. If the student wants to take any of these things for truth, he must worship it, since all truth is worshipful. In such a case, he is lost. The phantom will have power over him. it will obsess him. As long as an idea is being examined, you are free from it. There is no harm in man's experimenting with opium smoking or feeding on nuts. Okay, that is a little bit different levels of degree there, right? Like, is there a nut that you can eat that is the equivalent of smoking opium? Like I'm fairly well versed in most of the recreational narcotics. I mean, I haven't partaken of all of them, but I've taken a good deal of them. I enjoyed that quite a lot when I was young, and I do not recommend it. Right? That was a terrible experience overall. I thought I was enjoying myself much more than I actually was. And so I don't recommend those type of things for people. I do smoke cannabis. I do not make denials about that. It is a recreational thing for me these days, but it was medicinal for a long time. But I am fully unaware of any nut that you can take that is the equivalent of smoking opium. Now, I am going to go ahead and put this out there because I recently had surgery, right? We are almost to 4 months, right? The use of painkillers, to me, in my experience, completely shut me off from the forces of creation in entirety. I was not able to sense them, move them, do anything with them. And so, to me, opium being the thing that they derive these pain drugs from is probably going to have the same effect. So if you are attempting to do, what I have talked about in this book, the manipulation of the electromagnetic powers of creation, which is the Holy Spirit, I would suggest not partaking of opium because it is going to be intrinsically opposed to what you are trying to do. I do not know about feeding on nuts being about anything, so if you have some enlightenment on that, please drop that down below. But I do not recommend opium. Right, I tell you many times that I am not here to live your experience. You are free to make your choices, but I have been through several choices, and I can tell you fairly effectively that opium does not lead to a productive place in life. And if that is confusing to you, fall back to the origin story where I talk about my struggles with addiction over time, and one of those was definitely painkillers. And so you are free to make your choices. You have free will, but I wouldn't if I was you. But the moment he ceases to examine, to act from habit and without reflection, he is in trouble. That is true, right? If you are doing something simply from habit, it is easy to fall into bad patterns. It is especially easy if you were talking about something that will literally steal your soul and everything good in your life. We, all of us, eat too much. All's a big word there, big guy. Because people, liveried and obsequious, have always bustled up 5 times daily with 6 months' provisions. And it was less trouble to feed and be done with it than to examine the question whether we were hungry. I don't eat too much. I normally eat around once a day. I will snack. I only eat whether I am hungry. I actually asked the question. I have been asking that particular question for probably close to a decade now. Right? It was not something that I set out to do, to only eat 1 meal a day. I decided I am only going to eat when I am hungry, and that led to me only eating 1 time a day. Take from that what you will. Right now, I do not have the level of activity that I did when I was working outside, right? When I was doing construction. So if you were doing construction, you're probably going to need to eat more than just once a day. Calorie intake is an important thing to energy output, and so you should be taking in the appropriate amount of energy to get to your goals. I live a rather sedentary life these days. For the last 15 years, since 2011, right, 14 years, I got in a car wreck and I was injured. I had a very sedentary life, and my caloric intake was the requirements was much lower than it had been. And so in order to not be putting on weight, I came to the realization that I only needed to eat when I was hungry, and that led to all of this. I mean, I'm down 40 pounds in the last 5 years. I am able to move and do things that I couldn't before. I am healed in very real ways. And so, like, we haven't really talked about this over here yet. So if you are here, you're hearing it fairly new, right? I believe I have mentioned it once, but I'm running again, right? We are 2 days away from 4 months since my tibular plateau was completely broken, right? You can see the x-rays if you go back through my post on my page where the tibular plateau was driven down about half to 3/4 of an inch. They had to restructure it, rebuild it, put a metal plate on there. I'm running, right? I was walking faster than I should have been. I am running ahead of time. Now, that is not me running a mile. That's me running about 1/4 of a mile, getting my leg ready, used to taking that pounding again, because that is something you have to get your body back used to. But it is not really a problem when I get to the end. I'm not really that much in a hurt. I'm not trying to push it too hard, but all of this to say that making better decisions has led to better things in my life, was why we are over here talking about these things. You should only eat when you're hungry, right? There's social settings for eating. Okay, do your thing, right? It is even okay to be gluttonous once in a while. I like to binge on ice cream and cake and things, but I am still losing weight because that is not my normal pattern of behavior. We, all of us as a society, we do, right? We have a tendency to overconsume, and it's especially bad in the last 60 years. We have more fat people living now than probably ever in the entire history of the planet. We have fat homeless people, right? We have fat people that don't have a roof over their head, but they can get Cokes, they can get candy, they can get chips, and none of that is good for you. It tastes good, kind of, but for the most part, it's horrible for you physically. You should be very careful with the things you consume. They literally become you, right? So if you are consuming sugar, you are becoming sugar. I wonder why we have so much diabetes. All right, soapbox done. If you cook your own food, you soon find that you don't cook more or less than you want, and health returns. If, however, you go to the other extreme and think of nothing but diet, you are almost sure to acquire that typical form of melancholia, in which the patient is convinced that all the world is in league to poison him. There is definitely something about being on a diet that will just throw you off, right? People look at it the wrong way, and that's the major problem with almost all of the problems that we have, is that people look at it the wrong way. Right? You see this restriction in your diet as a bad thing, but it's not. It's to help you be healthier. If you are seeing it as a bad thing, you're making the wrong choices in your diet. Right? Dieting doesn't have to be horrible. I eat the best food. Like, I can cook, y'all. I can throw down the victuals like almost nobody else. I live in South Louisiana. My mama's side of the family is 100% coon-ass. We can cook all of the stuff. Gumbo, etouffee, jambalaya, you name it. I can cook it. I can cook things that ain't even from my culture. I like to eat. And I cook good food. I cook with lard. I cook with butter. I cook with eggs. I cook with honey. I cook with sugar. I don't skimp, right? I like the taste of food. I just don't overconsume it. I eat a portion that is enough to fill me up. I don't glutton myself to the point where I'm like, oh, it hurts. I'm so full I can't hardly breathe. If you're doing that, you're doing it wrong. That's the problem, right? We've got this in our head where this plate is 14 inches around and we've got to fill it up and consume the whole thing. You don't. Your stomach is this big. Right? Hold your hand out like this. This is your stomach. This right here is how big your stomach is. It might be a little bit bigger, it might be a little bit smaller, but this is about the size of your stomach. It is your fist. If you are consuming more food than the size of your fist, you're eating too much. You should have nutrient-dense food so that you don't have to eat so much. You shouldn't be eating pre-packaged processed food so that you're not pulling in all of these nasty things that they put in there. Then preservatives are terrible for you. I know that's controversial. I don't care. If you are eating MSG, you're killing yourself. It tastes great. I get it. It's sugar, salt, monosodium glutamate. sugar, salt, salt. And of course, it triggers good taste things. But are they good for you? No, they're not. It is bad for you. It's bad for your liver. It's bad for your kidneys. It's bad for your gut health. Those things kill the good bacteria in your stomach. And people go and eat Chinese. And they're like, I don't know why I feel so bad after I eat the Chinese. It's because it's slap ass full of MSG. Be careful with the things that you take in, and you can live a healthier life with less. Shop the outside of the grocery store, right? If you walk around the outside of the grocery store, you're normally going to find fruits and vegetables, meats and dairy, and fresh food, right? And all the middle is taken up with the frozen stuff, the prepackaged stuff, the canned stuff, and while those serve a purpose, they're not all that healthy for you. So if you can shop on the outside edge, you're going to be a healthier person overall. And again, I am not telling you that you have to fully exclude anything. I eat ice cream, I eat cake, I eat cereal, like I eat all kinds of sweet stuff. I just do so in moderation. And that makes all of the difference. That's the mindset. Right? If you are being deprived, so I can't have sugar, then you're going to crave the sugar. But if you're like, I'm going to have a little bit of sugar, I just have to do it in moderation, it takes care of the cravings. I have honey in here. I don't really use refined sugar all that much because it's not all that good for you. Honey is much better for you. And so I try to substitute honey for sugar wherever I can. But it is a little bit more expensive and it's a little bit harder to work with. And so there are considerations that have to be done, a trade-off in everything that you do. But you should be choosing the thing that is most beneficial to you. Now, that is with the full understanding. You are not meant to exclude, right? With very few exceptions. You are not meant to exclude meat from your diet. You are not meant to exclude gluten from your diet. You are not supposed to exclude carbohydrates from your diet. These things serve very important parts of your health. You should do so in moderation, right? But make good choices. Now, convinced that all the world is in league to poison him, there's a saying, right? How do you know if somebody's a vegan? Just wait, they'll tell you. All the world's in league to poison him, right? When you begin one of these exclusionary diets, you start thinking you're better than everybody. Right? I'm a vegetarian, I don't eat meat, I'm better than you. Right? I am the best on the planet, I don't eat sugar at all. I'm so much better than you. And that's the pride mindset that goes into this asceticism. And it's not everybody, but it's most of them. And it's probably you, right? If you are doing something, you're probably thinking you're better than somebody else because of the things that you do. That is a mindset that we are prone to, and it's one of the things that we need to work on, right? Our communication about pride and humility is balance in our life. All of that to say to make healthy choices, right? I'm kind of off on a tangent, but all right. Professor Schweinhund has shown that beef causes gout. That has been disproven. Professor Nashtikov proves that milk causes consumption. Hold up. I must have the wrong definition for this. Let's do this. Consumption disease. Tuberculosis. Really? Wow. Okay, so drinking milk gives you TB. See that lens of history? See that lens that we got to look back through now? It's so great, right? We have such better knowledge, and that's not to say we will not get a better knowledge later, but tuberculosis is caused by a bacteria, and it is not a milk-borne one. We just seen it, right? And so, no, right? Now, fully granting, this was 1912. Bacteriology was brand new. We were just learning things. Hell, we were just discovering mustard gas, by which we would kill close to 1 million people over the course of the next 3 years. Right? We were just discovering these things. We didn't have the electron microscope yet. We had not yet attained flight, or we were just attaining flight that year. I think 1912 was the Wright brothers. The Model T was 1902. This is brand new, right? All of this is 1912 was the Model T too, right? So we're looking at brand new technology, and so we have the lens of history to look back through. We know that beef does not cause gout. Inactivity might, right? Gout is the inflammation of the fatty tissues. It is caused by an irritation of the overconsumption of fat, but it is not exclusively beef. And I'm not sure that it is entirely attributed to the consumption. There are other factors that play a part. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not an expert. So I'm just trying to relay the things that I kind of know. But milk causing consumption, milk did not cause tuberculosis. We have the ability now to be able to look back at the bacteria and viruses and understand what happened. They didn't then. That's what I was going off on this lens of history rant, right? We can look back through the knowledge that we have attained since then and have come to a better understanding. That's why I try to be so not determinate in many of the things I say, because if it is not something that is cut and dried proven, then there's a very good chance that I can be proven wrong in the future, right? The things that I put down in here, you're going to have a hard time proving me wrong. I have done these things. I have gotten the results. But there are many things we talk about that are still very much up in the air. So Ruffin Rats tells us that old age is brought on by eating cabbage. That's fucking hilarious. There are entire countries in the world that have never had cabbage. Now, I couldn't list them all for you, but some of the islands probably. There are places where people have not consumed cabbage and they still get old. By and by, you reach the state of which Mr. Hereward Carrington made his proud boast. Your soul food is chocolate, which you chew unceasingly even in your dreams. Yet no sooner have you taken it into you than you awaken to the terrible truth demonstrated by Gutterbach Q. Hosenscheiser, 4th Avenue, Grand Rapids, that chocolate is the cause of constipation and constipation of cancer, and proceed to get it out of you by means of an enema which would frighten a camel into convulsions. I'm glad we got that lens of history to look through. That's all I'm going to say. We're going to leave that right there. A similar madness attacks even real men of science. Metchnikoff studied the diseases of the colon until he could see nothing else, and then calmly proposed to cut out everyone's colon. Pointing out a vulture, who has no colon, is a very long-lived bird. As a matter of fact, the longevity of the vulture is due to its twisted neck, and many thoughtful persons propose to experiment on Professor Metchnikoff. Is this a matter of fact? Is that what it is? The thing that makes a vulture live as long as it does is that it has a twisted neck. Really? Really? That's a matter of fact. Okay. Now, I'm going to say people do live without a colon. It is not a pleasant experience whatsoever. We have colonoscopies, right? Generally speaking, people have to get a colostomy bag whenever they do that, right? It collects the things that should have been going in your colon. It's not a pleasant experience for anyone involved in that at all. And so the doctor recommending that everybody lose their colon is wild, but again, lens of history. But the worst of all phantasms are the moral ideas and religious ideas. Ooh-wee. Hold on. Sanity consists in the faculty of adjusting ideas in proper proportion. Anyone who accepts a moral or religious truth without understanding it is only kept out of the asylum because he does not follow it out logically. If one really believed in Christianity, if one really thought that the majority of the mankind was doomed to eternal punishment, one would go raving about the world trying to save people. Footnote: one would go mad if one took the Bible seriously, but to take it seriously one must already be mad. Crowley. Now, bear in mind, Aleister Crowley was particularly rebellious against the Bible. Right? That is evident from his life. We went over that in the first video. And so take anything that he says about it with a grain of salt. But again, I am also kind of antithetical to the Bible. I know that steps on toes, but I don't care. I did 161 videos in which I read the Bible like we are doing here. And the things that I extracted from it was that you should not take the Bible seriously. Right? Do not take it literally at all. There are sections that you can take seriously, but even not the majority. Most of it is bad. Most of it is going to lead you down a path of bitterness, hatefulness, resentfulness, sloth. It really is a rather bad example of how. And I know that steps on toes. But that steps on toes of the people who have never read the Bible in the context in which it is written. If you take off them glasses of predestination, that somebody was the chosen person for the redemption of all mankind, which is a little bit wild, or that God, who created everybody, just decided to single out this one particular group of people for no real reason whatsoever. Abraham was definitely not somebody to emulate. Right? If you take off those particular lenses and you read through it, you can see that it was pretty horrible, that the God that the Jews worshiped was not a good one. He was jealous, bitter, ignorant, stupid, mean. He was a bad God. And that's looking at it objectively, right? I serve the God who is the creator of all things. He never told anyone to hit somebody else in the head with a rock. Not ever. Not even for like well, maybe for the horrible things, right? If you kill somebody, it's okay if you die. Yeah, I know, that steps on more toes. I don't care. Right? If you are acting antithetical to the betterment of mankind, then there are consequences to such. And if you are killing someone, there is a consequence that will be borne out. If you are attacking someone and they take you out, that is just the way that it goes. They don't suffer any negative consequences from that, except maybe some sleepless nights. But the Bible will tell you that if somebody picks up the stick on the wrong day, to beat them in the head with a rock until they quit breathing. That is a real thing, right? That is the law. The law also tells you that if someone rapes a woman, there's no criminal penalty. Pay the father a little bit of money, marry the woman, everything is fine. That is the law given from the Word of God. Are you kidding me? And that's not even the worst of it. It gets bad. There's some terrible stuff in there. Look at what David had to do. Look at what Joshua did before they started taking over Israel. Now, that is if you read it literally, right? Now, if you read it as an allegory, which we are diving into in the Pitcast, then there are other things that you can take from that, but it is not a literal history. If you read it as a literal history, you're making a mistake. It does contain some history. We have other works of fiction that do that as well. Right? We have alternative histories that change the way that it goes. Just because it took in some historical facts that were contemporary to them doesn't mean that it was a full, accurate history. There are many things that are provably untrue contained within the Bible. Right? The persecution of the firstborn sons of Israel in the time of Jesus, there is no record of that taking place whatsoever. Right? And the Romans wrote down the terrible things they did as well as the good things, and so it would have been recorded. There was no darkening of the sun on the crucifixion of Jesus. Not recorded by anybody. Wildest thing. Right? There are many provably untrue things in the Bible. That completely takes away from the infallible argument. And while there are many very good moral applications for the things that are in the Bible, there are many that are terrible as well. Up to and including, sell all that you own, give it to the poor, and come and follow me. That is a completely unbalanced way of looking at life. You should be giving things away. That is true. You should not love things more than people. That is true. But you are meant to have things. You are not meant to sell everything and go. Right? That is with almost everybody. Right? There is always the exceptions on the far end of the spectrum that are meant to have or meant to not have in excess. But it is not most people. Most people are meant to have things. It is almost certainly not you that you are not meant to have things, that you are meant to sell off everything. The same with sex. Almost nobody is called to never have sex. But there's people who will tell you, well, the Bible tells you that it's better to never get married. Yeah, there's a reason for that. We're not going to, It is hard to be unequally yoked, and if you are on the path of spiritual enlightenment, there is a very good chance that your partner is not, and that is an unequal yoking. That is hard. And so, in that particular instance, it is better to be single, right? But it's always better to have a partner. It's always better to give love. It's always better to grow and expand. And so, it's probably better to have a partner than to not. That is for almost everyone on the planet. There are many things in the Bible that are true. That is undeniable. But there are many things in the Bible that are absolutely untrue, intrinsically false. And that's not even talking about the speculative parts, right? Like the understanding that you have to kill an animal to get forgiven from sin, that you can go to heaven, that is not biblical, right? They did indeed commit sacrifice of animals for the remission of sin. That was for now. That was not for eternity. That is the entire Old Testament. They did not go to heaven or hell. Right? There was no overarching redemptive property to this. It was to take away the sins so that I could live now in the abundance of God, in the blessings of God. And the sacrifice never really did it anyway. It tells you in almost every single book of the Old Testament that you did not need a sacrifice at all. That we have the sacrifice so that it'll hit you in the pocketbook, so that you feel a consequence for the actions and therefore are more likely to change those actions. That is the entire point of the sacrifice. The sacrifice never saved you. That is already God's possession. What difference does it make to Him if you give it to Him? It makes a difference to you because you invested your money into raising that animal, and now you've messed up and you have to sacrifice it. It's a hit in the pocketbook. It's a lesson learned. It is not about redeeming your soul. And if that animal never had to die, there was definitely no human that ever had to die to redeem you from sin. That is a lie. That has been given to you. And you eat it up. Probably not you if you're here, but I'm just saying, you should not take the Bible seriously. There are good lessons to be learned, but you should not take it as the infallible truth. You should not. And if that is confusing to you, I have 161 hours of reading the Bible. The same way that we do here, right? I read it and then we discuss it. We did word studies. Go back and see what the words actually mean. Like the very beginning. Everything in the beginning is misinterpreted. God never said, let there be. Sleep would not be possible until the horror of the mind left the body exhausted. Otherwise, one must be morally insane. Which of us can sleep if one we love is in danger of mere death? We cannot even see a dog drown without at least interrupting all of our business to look on. I believe that you would look on. I do not believe that you would attempt to save him, because you already told us that it is perfectly fine to kill a dog for barking if it is interrupting your meditation. Remember that? Yeah, I'm still pissed off about that. Who, then, can live in London and reflect upon the fact that of its 7 million souls, all but about 1,000 Plymouth Brethren will be damned? Yet the 1,000 Plymouth Brethren, who are the loudest in proclaiming that they will be the only ones saved, seem to get on very well, thank you. Whether they are hypocrites or morally insane is a matter which we can leave to our own consideration. Now, he used this because that is what his father became, right? He went from one super strict faction of Christianity into another extra super strict faction of Christianity, and that led to all of this rebellion that we see. Aleister said that his dad was his homie, but that was a lie. That is evidenced by the actions that he has taken since the man died. All right. All these phantoms of whatever nature must be evoked, examined, and mastered. Otherwise, we may find that just when we want it, there is some idea with which we have never dealt, and perhaps that idea, springing on us by surprise and, as it were, from behind, may strangle us. This is the legend of the sorcerer, strangled by the devil. Now, there is a glossary here. We are not going to go through the glossary. There is a lot of words. But this is going to bring us to the end of part 2. We will be picking up in part 3, which is another explanation of the magical processes. That'll be the next video. I wanted to keep these separate, and somehow we managed to turn 3 pages into 50 minutes. I don't know how I did that, but okay. That's going to bring us to the end of the study, and hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. The understanding that I have given is the one that was given to me, right? The things that I speak about, I feel are fairly true, but I am always willing to be corrected. You are not going to convince me that, well, the Bible actually recorded that there was an eclipse when Jesus died, so it happened, right? That is not going to happen because the Bible is the only source that has that particular event. You're not going to be able to convince me that a sacrifice was necessary to forgive you from sin because the Bible itself tells you differently. Most people are unaware of what they operate in. Right? Their own understanding is flawed about their own belief systems, and that is fairly undisputed. Right? Many people may argue with it, but they don't have the leg to stand upon. Most people have not read the Bible. That is a simple, indisputable fact. They rely upon the pastor to interpret the Bible for them. The pastor doesn't read the Bible in the right way. He reads it through apologetics. He has already seen what needs to happen, and so he makes the adjustments as he reads the Bible to explain away the parts that are really not explainable. Right? The parts that are really not, right? The fact that God never gave the law. Moses developed the law on the recommendation of his father-in-law Jethro. Right? Well, that's a big deal. The fact that in Kings and Chronicles, there is no mention of Moses. That might be a big deal. Right? If they are operating off of the law, which is definitely arguable, then they should know where the law came from. But there is a very good argument that Moses never existed. There is a very good argument that Babylon invented the Jews. That is something I am learning about. Jason's keying me in on that. Right? There is a very good possibility that after the exile to Babylon, the Babylonians wanted to take over this area, and so they developed this history that they gave. Now, there are some problems with that, right? By the time of the second temple, the coming out of Babylon, there were several tribes already missing, like already gone. They had been taken away by the various, I think the Mechalites took some, and the Sumerians might have taken some away, right? The northern tribes were taken away. The southern tribes were taken by Babylon, and then they came back, according to the history. And so, why would you create these tribes in the north if there was no tribes there currently to explain, right? Now, that is one of those things. It's brand new. I haven't deep dove into it, but it does make a little bit of sense, right? There is definitely proof that the Babylonians control the area. There is less proof that anybody came from Egypt, right? There is significant reasons to doubt the entirety of Exodus, and if you really want to dive into that, I have done it in this study of Exodus. Many of the things about Moses' life make no sense whatsoever until you consider that there were other stories, right? The bitumen basket that Moses was placed in and set into the river, well, you can find that in Sargon of Akkad. Right? There are many other stories, like the Odyssey, for example, contains many of the things that you will find in the New Testament in the works of Jesus. Right? The casting out of the demon into the swine, mirrors Circe with the driving the swine. There are many things like that, and they're not one-on-one correlations, but they could be. Right? And so, all of that to say, don't take the Bible as an authority. You can use it as a historical reference. You can use it somewhat as a moral guide, but for the most part, I wouldn't even do that. That's where I'm going to leave this, right? I'm already rambling on a lot more than I probably should have. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. Whether you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly. That's it. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.